Yama and welcome to Blacademia. I'm your host, Amy Tunick McGregor, and joining me today is the fantastic Luke Pearson. Yama, Luke.
Yama, Amy.
You may know Luke as the CEO and founder of IndigenousX. Luke, what else may people know you for?
Oh God! Unless you know me in real life, you only know me from IndigenousX. I think that was my bio on our Blue Sky when we all moved there. It's like, you may remember me from such social media platforms as Twitter.
So for the listeners who have been around since the Twitter days, IndigenousX kind of got it starting on Twitter. But for those who weren't around for the Twitter era, can you tell people what is IndigenousX?
Yeah, well, if we say what it is now, we still do media. We still publish articles. We're on, I think we technically still have an X account, but I wouldn't bother with it. But yeah, we're Indigenous owned, very small team. There's only a handful of us there now. We do a lot of anti-racism training. We do a lot of education work and consultancy behind the scenes. We still publish articles and make social content. But yeah, very hard to, whenever I'm filling out any like tax forms or they're like, what do you do? It's always hard to say.
And behind IndigenousX, you have a history as a school teacher and a lecturer at numerous universities. And something that people might not know about you at all is you're currently doing your PhD as well.
I am.
So I was thinking this would just be a perfect yarn to have on Blacademia because I know you have the biggest fan base when it comes to your work in the media, both your witty and very astute commentary on politics and all things related to this continent. But also you are a phenomenal lecturer. You've got years of experience lecturing at a university level. You were a school teacher back in the day. We have that in history and we have that history in common. And now you're on the way to becoming Dr. Luke Pearson. So can you tell me about your role as a lecturer and your involvement with universities and how that kind of led to you finally choosing to do a PhD? And I say finally because for years I've been saying, Luke, you do the work anyway. Let's, finalize it. Let's formalize it. Let's get that title attached to it.
Yeah, I think, with all that, it's like when you say, like my role as a lecturer, or, a writer, a journalist, teacher, like they're all just words. They're all just things, like for the most part, certainly my adult life, I've been fairly comfortable on stage. I always remember, the last time I ever wrote a speech, I was like 18 or 19 and literally walked up on stage with a written speech, scrunched it up, threw it in the bin and just talked. Anyone who went to uni with me, it's like if we were ever at the pub a few drinks in, what you heard there was not too different to what you would hear on stage or hear here. And the same with writing. It's sort of, I've always, I guess, spent a lot of time thinking about these things to make sense of the world around me. I think for a lot of mob, like that need to understand racism, to counter it, to deflect it, to navigate everything that is and that comes at us and that is said about us has always just been a driver. So it's that, I became a teacher, growing up, like I grew up mostly in Wagga and around that area, Wiradjuri country. Dad was a labourer, mum worked public service. So dad, bricklayer, crane driver, odd jobs here and there. I just kind of grew up assuming I'd just get an apprenticeship and that's what we did. And then when I was looking at uni, teaching just kind of made sense. And then I fell into that. Loved it, but I think like a lot of mob didn't love the department. And then, when I left teaching, I was very lucky. I'd done my uni up here in Newcastle. Wallatuka invited me back to do guest tutoring and lectures. And then when I stumbled into Twitter, which is where IndigenousX started, I would get invited to give talks and public speaking, and it was all very flattering and very funny. But I always found it all a bit silly as well. Like there's something just oddly artificial about being on a stage of people you don't know speaking, and then they clap when you stop. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's a weird world. I just think I'm just always me. I can write, I can talk. I know about this stuff and I'm happy to talk about it without necessarily thinking I know all the things or better than anyone else, but I have fun doing it. And if people have fun hearing it or reading it, then that's a win-win.
I do. Obviously, I'm biased, but I do feel that there is something about the way we are raised as Gamilaraay people that empowers and encourages teaching behaviors. So the qualities that I would say are really common in great teachers are excellent communicators, being willing to question systems, but also not treating the people you're talking to as empty vessels. You know, recognizing that teaching is a reciprocal process. It's recognizing that the people that you're teaching are also teaching you, that everyone comes in with their own worldviews. And I do think I have this ongoing theory that this is why so many mob who are in positions where oration and, you know, teaching, lecturing, communicating, teaching is part of what we're doing, why so many mob who are in those roles are our mob. And so for those of you not across all the university and the language and the places, we have one of our alumni in common. We're both alumni of the University of Newcastle, and Wallatuka began as the student support space there and has since, in the 30 years of its existence, grown into much, much more than that, which is wonderful. It's a phenomenal space. We've both worked there. We've both studied through there. It's really excellent. So, look, you have been involved in IndigenousX, online teaching, orating. You've done a TED Talk. You've done, what are some of the big speeches that people might be like, oh, I've watched one of those?
The Marbo oration was probably one of the biggest ones. I think I was the first person who wasn't a lawyer to give that oration, which was very cool. And yeah, like I said, you do so many of them over the years, it's hard to remember, but it's like one called like a big talk, a do lecture. I don't know. You just kind of put me in front of the crowd and I'll start talking.
And over the years, you have been contacted by so many researchers and academics who have wanted your time and your knowledge, and also to study and utilise the work that's available on IndigenousX. So IndigenousX has a website component where so many mob have written over the years. I actually got my public writing start through IndigenousX. So like 7 years ago, I was thinking about this last night. So I was like, because, you know, Luke and I are good mates and our families are tied, and it's one of those things where you go, oh, what do I really want to bring forward to share with people? And then I was like, oh my goodness, actually, it was IndigenousX that I got my start with via Twitter. So I was starting my PhD, and like you observed, you know, the idea of getting up and talking in front of people and them clapping is this kind of silly, strange thing. And I was finding the same with academic language. Words like dearth and paucity, and just going, what? Like, what are these words? Why does everyone talk like this? And then reading about ethics, which is, you know, this process before you can engage in formal research practices. You're supposed to go through an ethical process where you make certain commitments. And these are really serious. And one of the commitments, I was reading existing ethic papers, like ethical clearances, to see what I was expected to do myself, and seeing how many researchers swore that they were going to draw from communities. So they would get Aboriginal peoples and communities' times. They would gather their data, their storying, their heartache, their trauma, their most intimate things. And in exchange, they would return that back. They would disseminate, they would share their findings with the community. And when I would go and follow up some of these researchers and their projects, I couldn't find examples of them doing it. And so I started asking around what in practice is actually done. And I was told that half the time the research projects create a bunch of very formal peer-reviewed papers, and they just drop them off at the local AMS, the Aboriginal Medical Centre, or a community space in the existing language. And I thought, what use is that if you're given the information but you don't understand it? Like, no one talks like this in my world. And so I made a commitment to like double publish anything that I created in the academy. I'd also create outside of the academy using language that people would understand, but I had no experience doing any of that. And so Luke, actually, I applied and I got like a fellowship, or
we had some partnership with someone. It was one of those funny things. I don't think we ever did it again. But we partnered maybe with Eureka Street.
That's who it was. Yes.
And yeah, it was sort of like a competition style. We had, a dozen people or so wrote articles for us, and we reached out to a few people to help us judge, and you won it. And I remember working through those, and it's the same, like we've worked, I think, with a lot of academics, and the biggest thing being about that plain language accessible, because I think it's something, and when I've read back some of my stuff, I don't know if it's as plain language and accessible as I had originally thought, which is one of the things of going to uni will do that to you.
Yeah.
But I think it's as much like the accessible tone and framing. So while I might still occasionally drop the whatever big words of things, I think if it's one or two big words, you either work them out from context or you look those up. But it's what I struggle with in coming back into academia now, where I'm reading something and I'm like, oh God, okay. So I Google it and it's like, it means because. And I'm like, cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Like that's when it becomes so inaccessible for things where it's like there is a plain language word for this. When you have a concept that there isn't a plain language word for, then you need to use some of those words. And I think that was where we were accessible, was that it was engaging.
Well, paucity and dearth, these are words that I get really caught up on, because for whatever reason they kept cropping up when I was at the point in my PhD that you're at now, that part where you're going, oh my gosh, I've got to learn and integrate all of this language and how I write in these spaces. Paucity and dearth kept popping up. It just means they both mean the same thing, and it's just not a lot of. And it's just the ongoing example for me. I try and remind myself, and as part of why I do Blacademia is I want to break down the concepts of what the academia spaces are, what the academy is, so that mob who might benefit from utilizing these resources and tools feel like they can have a crack, that they can enter the space, or they might see something that resonates with them. But the language is so tricky, because there are words to, like intersectionality, for example, to try and explain intersectionality using more frequently used words would, I think, become a bit of a word salad. But to say not a lot of is a lot easier and less of a mouthful than saying there is a paucity of.
Like, there are times when to explain a complex idea simply you do need more words, but it gives you a deeper understanding, because it's like when you've got one word that sums up the whole thing, but you don't know what the word is, then sometimes two sentences is better than one word.
Absolutely.
So, and that's such a struggle, like focusing on word counts and this and this. And Twitter, and I'm sort of reverse engineering it now, but I always talked about, like, I went to uni and every assignment was the same. There's one sentence and they say, write 5,000 words about this sentence. Whereas you go to Twitter and it's like, take whatever it is you're thinking, feeling, want to share, and put it originally into 140 characters. That was, it moved to 280 characters, and then it moved to you could create threads. But that first generation Twitter was, each tweet was standalone as it is, and I got really good at putting ideas into that exact 140 character space. And now that I'm like, I've got to write like 30,000 words for something soon, I'm really having to break it down into little chunks to make that not feel so overwhelming. But I also, like, I only want to use, as complicated a meta language as is really necessary. Because I think it's that balance of, like I said, some things you need to, and there is a part of academia that is like, you need to show you can. But there's also a lot of academia where it's like, it's this wanky sort of artistic performance where it's like, can you come up with ever wankier ways to say the same thing that someone else has already said.
Well, and to a very limited audience.
Oh, yeah,
So
that too.
it is such a restricted audience. Like if you want to, you can really create, like they talk about a social media bubble, the academic bubbles that exist. And I think part of the tensions for mob in the academy is when you go to conferences and you're inadvertently, not knowingly, bursting a white academics bubble. They have been writing on and speaking for Indigenous peoples, never expecting mob to be in the audience at these conferences, which cost a bomb to go to. And I know myself and several of my colleagues have found ourselves in the audiences really excited, like looking forward to, you know, seeing a panel and, you know, topics that you think, oh, this is great because it's, you know, maybe they've got language in the title and so you think it's going to be mob and then the things they say when they think that there's no mob in the room are really intense. But that's one of the big differences I find between when you're creating work in the public sphere and you're creating work in the academic sphere. And they should be one in the same. Like the academic work should be treated like it's out for the public, but it's not. And this is where I think it leads to being called the ivory tower and all of those kinds of things, which can put mob off the space, I think. But who you're getting criticism from, who's even reading it, who can access the articles because most of them are paywalled, and then who's going to understand them because they're full of, you know, really intense jargon can mean that it's really limited. Whereas back in the day of the OG Twitter space, it was like a town square and there was so much fantastic connection, and that's dead, like it's gone. That space no longer exists on that website. Certainly not advocating for people to go, I nuked my account when things changed, but it used to be a town square that allowed for opportunities you could share with other mob, you know, fellowships, programs, job adverts in a way that allowed people to boost and uplift, and it wasn't so insular. And I do miss that about OG Twitter. It was really good, but it was also really anxiety inducing as someone who had always been quite private and didn't know anyone who'd been in the space. And I remember, I think it was probably my third article during the fellowship, because I would send you something and I'd get some edits and then it would go live and then I wouldn't sleep for 3 nights. And I remember, and I'd want to change everything. As soon as it was published, I'd be like, actually, I wish I had written this better. I wish I had written that better. Oh, I should have, you know, cited these people. And I think it was the third article. I was on the phone to you and I was like begging you to let me edit an article. And I just remember you saying, this level of anxiety isn't sustainable. Cut it out. And although I wouldn't normally advocate for telling an anxious person to chill out, it wouldn't normally work. It was really effective because you'd said it wasn't sustainable. And I was like, you're right, actually. I've got kids. I was trying to do a PhD. I was a single mum at the time. I was trying to get all this work done. And every time something would come out, I was just so worried. I was like, I wanted to get it perfect for everyone. And I remember as that platform kind of grew and my writing and my things got read and that by more people, trying to get it right for everyone across an entire continent would stress me out so much. And I remember you said to me once, at some point you just can't thread that needle. Do your best and move on. Yeah. And that was so useful. But you have not only survived, but thrived and held space for mob and new writers and old writers through IndigenousX for so long. What are some of your keys to success or tips that you would share?
I think when I think about like the success of IndigenousX, but I think a big part of it was there was nothing attached to it. There was no goal outside of itself. So back then, like you didn't start a thing on Twitter as a business plan, as an idea. We weren't. Yeah, like I talk about like IndigenousX now, that was at 2012 we started. So 13 years, but it was like the first 7 of that. There was no business. So there was no ABN, there was no website, there was nothing. It was just me doing something because I believed in it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the interesting things I reflect on is that like IndigenousX had a pretty clear purpose. And as life got more complicated and Twitter got more complicated and things get more complicated the more they go, it was interesting to see where my ethics didn't always align with IndigenousX's. But it was actually really easy because instead of getting that, I was just like, no, IndigenousX has its own ethics.
Yeah.
So it was an open door space.
Yeah.
So that question of like, oh, but I don't actually like that person or what it was never relevant because it wasn't about me. If IndigenousX had ever just been Luke and the people who agree with me or the people I like or the people that wouldn't have been anything.
Yeah.
So I think the good thing was I was tied to a higher ethic. But then it was just, like I said, it was very natural because I think before, when you say, Twitter was a town square, like it only really became that when it got big enough for people started looking about it. Like the really first, when there was like a very small number of us on there, no one was paying any attention to us. So we were saying all sorts of whatever.
Yeah.
It was really just Bob Yarn, and there was only like maybe a couple of dozen of us or a very small number of us. And then suddenly, a few things happened, and good and bad, and journalists started paying attention and numbers started to grow, and it became this town square thing. But before that, it was just yarning. And I sort of, again, I think playing into the ludicrousness of the spotlight and working really hard to try to not, like I never tried to play to that or for that. So it was like, if Mob needed something, I did something. If someone needed a yarn, I had a yarn. If someone had an issue, we worked it out. Like it was always just trying to not let it be bigger than it needed to be. And I think even now, like I've always said, if IndigenousX couldn't like add value or do, like I'd rather it die. And it's come pretty close to that, especially when Twitter died. But I think it's just that. It's like understand that it's been amazing. Like what we've achieved is amazing, but it also is very limited in what it can do. And so not trying to make it bigger than it needs to be or me bigger than it needs to be, and just keeping it grounded in that we're just having a go here. You know what I mean? Like I look back on, 13 years, we've made crazy mistakes, stupid mistakes, but it's like I said, I came from teaching, I came from, whatever, and then just to follow talking nonsense on Twitter to suddenly like a big responsibility, a lot of hypervisibility, a lot of opportunity in a way that, sort of really quickly made me a gatekeeper of sorts in that I chose who got to be the host. But like really it was like people just ring up, can I host? Yeah, cool. If I didn't have someone in, I reached out, can you host? Yeah, cool. Like it wasn't, but I could have.
But back in the day, the IndigenousX Twitter account had a rotating host.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Explain the core premise.
Each week someone new would host it. And it meant that it was that person's opinions, that person's sometimes beefs being aired. And it was a real not a democracy. Like there was, what's the word? Like it was just kind of
just open door policy.
It was an open door policy. Like you would pick them. They were always mob. But they could be posting about, and I mean, I won't give examples because I don't want people to kick off on this content. But like, all right, I'll give an example of like one time I was hosting and I got into a full-on fight with a very big journalist who then blocked IndigenousX but didn't go and block my account. Another time I got into it with the head of the DCJ because I had been sharing stats around stolen generation and he argued and he was wrong. And at the time, because I don't have a public service background, I didn't know that secretary meant the boss. And so I was like, this guy is like, you would think he would be able to look up the stats. If he's a secretary, I'm sure he's good at admin. Like, so I'm sitting there, it's like midnight because I've put my kids to bed and I'm doing my hosting duties on Twitter and I'm arguing with this guy. And then I went to bed and I woke up at like 3 a.m. from a dream going, I'm missing something here. I'm doing something wrong. And I went and looked up, what does secretary mean, like in the context of government departments? And it means the boss. Weird word, but I was fully arguing, and then I remember having to call you in the morning, like, hey, just so you know, last night, all my stats are correct. I've checked. I'm in the right, but I was using the IndigenousX account to fully argue with the head of the DCJ. And so there were things like that, and, you know, maybe without sharing any, like, particularly spicy examples, but how did you navigate? Because I know there were times where people would jump on as host and share things that you didn't agree with, where mob aren't always in agreement, and then you'd be copying the emails and phone calls all week. How did you navigate that?
It was always case by case, but I think for the most part, again, it was true to the ethic of like, if there's someone hosting and you don't like them, they'll be gone in a week. And I can remember saying that a lot of times to a lot of people, like, I don't like that this person's hosting. And I'm like, me either. Sometimes, but it was like, but you know what it is.
Yeah.
You know what this is.
Yeah.
And we had some big name conservative Indigenous people. It's funny, I hint there's like 3 of them. You can work out who I mean. But it was important at that time that they did host, because it showed that IndigenousX was something bigger than the clique side of it. And I mean, originally, there was only really one blackfella clique originally. But over time, the bigger it get, the more you get different camps and individuals who don't like each other, which again is normal and appropriate and as it should be.
Yeah.
But IndigenousX could never really pick sides within that.
Yeah.
When there were particularly bigger things that happened. But for the most part, it was, again, I think playing into the silliness of the whole thing. It's like, who cares if some journalist we've had to block or you've called out someone, or like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I think in those early years, like not having anything, there was nothing to lose. And whenever there was a risk of it, it was worth it. It felt worthwhile to have those fights and that gamble, because if it ever got too safe, then why have it?
And it's important, right? Like, we are many nations. We are forced into a homogenized representation through colonization that we push back on in various ways. But it is important that, and one of, I think, your most viral articles would be about the Take Me to Your Indigenous Leader. That idea of, who's the leader, and how people, non-Indigenous people, will defer to leaders that somehow always align with their views. And we are diverse. And even within, and we saw this with things like the referendum, there would be people who I would be on a panel with, disagreeing with, and then I'd be going to dinner with afterwards, because we're family, like we're relations, we're our connections forever. We're not necessarily arguing about our goals. Like, often we have shared goals, mob empowerment, youth justice, like things, shared, but how we get there is what we differ on, our opinions and things like that. And I think that differentiation of, maybe you've got a crap list, but that doesn't stop people from being on IndigenousX as long as they weren't considered like unsafe.
The only things we ever, and I was reminded of this reading an article someone else wrote a while ago, but it's like during the marriage
equality?
But I was going to say referendum, but it wasn't a referendum. Plebiscite, whatever that was. But yeah, during that, we did sort of put out and say we're not going to make space for no people.
Yeah.
Which look back, like that was a big thing that I didn't really, it just seemed very common sense to me. And yeah, maybe again, because the world has just gotten more and more complex, there probably would have been more things. Like I think right now with everything going on, I probably wouldn't have anyone going on advocating for Israel at the moment if we were still doing a rotating account. But I'm kind of glad that we didn't get to that point of me having to navigate all of those things.
It was a different balance back. Like the scales were different back then. It wasn't.
It's not like there weren't big issues in the world, but it's like no one was really looking to IndigenousX for those things, and so we could have. But I think when that came up, and just the rise in homophobia and just so vitriolic, that I did kind of just say, like, obviously it's not something I tested people on, but if someone had to come and said, I want to come to advocate for no, or if they were publicly known as a no person, I probably would have said, well, not I probably would have. We did say you're not welcome during for this.
And that would be, I think, the only example where you'd have to draw a line, because 7 years ago, if you'd said to me, oh yeah, well, people are going to be debating Nazis, I'd be like, that's insane.
Crazy,
That's not reality.
No pro-genocide. It didn't feel like something I needed to say at the time. Whereas now I think about it, and that's where the reality is, like, IndigenousX as it was, not just the death of Twitter, but I don't think it could have continued. I think it actually probably would have just died a natural death. in that form.
Well, even the backlash, like to people existing online now, like because my husband works in the television space, sometimes things come up and I think, oh, I have a few people we can tap for this to say, do you want to get in on this? And a lot of people will say no, because being public, like as a writer, as a creator, as an actor, whatever it is, a lot of people don't want anything to do with that because the attacks, and it's not like it's even people behind the screens, it's bots, it's systems. So back then it was, sometimes I'd get some really, really racist emails from fellow academics, usually anthropologists. They tended to come from that ilk and, things like that. But it certainly wasn't the large scale bot attacks, writing groups trying to get you fired. But just moving on, because I'm mindful of time and we could and do talk all day. So you've been involved in all of these things. You've been to academic conferences. You've been involved in research work. We've done papers together at conferences. Why a PhD now?
Oh, there's so many. I think it's one of those ones that I have been very mindful that it's probably something I should have done already. But I used to talk about it, I think, when we were still doing the hosting, when it was so busy managing the day-to-day, I always felt, because there was a lot of invites, because that was sort of the era where there was such a big push for Indigenous PhDs, which like there was the real birth of that push came in during that period. So I had a lot of people reach out, I used
to
from
send
unis
you links all the time. You should do this. You should do this.
But unis would reach out and go, Luke, like we'd love to have you. And I was like, I felt at that time that to do a PhD on IndigenousX particularly would have been an autopsy.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would have killed it
Yeah.
in the stopping trying to study it as it was moving. Whereas now that I'm in this in-between period, it's been a few years since we stopped the rotating, but I think it's a moment to take breath, to take stock of what we have done, good and bad, and work out where we're going. So the big questions for me in the PhD, like fundamentally when you get to the core of it, it's like what works in anti-racism education, both in training, because like I said, we do a lot of anti-racism training, but also from a content creation perspective. And not just what works in that practical, because that can be a bit of a dangerous trap to fall into. Just because it seems effective doesn't mean it's good. So it's like, what should we be doing and what works? And part of that is mapping out the future of IndigenousX, but a little bit as well a chance, because there's so many of those stories that don't live anywhere else. They didn't translate. And look, I meet a lot of young people now who are more like, I read this article. It's just like, I did not write them with the mind that they would be used in a class. So my apologies for the weirdness, especially some of the big 5,000 word ones I wrote at the start. Just like rambling stream of consciousness. But it's some of those stories I think are important. And, I was so busy in the doing, and I think this is something true to my life generally. Like I don't often stop and go, you did that. Well done, you.
Yeah.
One, it feels, again, I don't want to play into the ego of that, but it is important in your life to go, hey, I climbed the mountain. I won the fight, or even just I fought to the best of my ability when you don't win. But I've always been that. It's like, okay, the next thing, and it's not even me going the next thing. It's quite the next thing just comes at you. It's really interesting looking back on some of the moments and just going, wow, like we did that.
Yeah.
Like, we did some really cool things. Even, helping with the crowdfunding. Like we had a pseudo partnership with Start Some Good, who are one of the early crowdfund. Like we raised like over $1 million for different Indigenous campaigns. We helped amplify, so I don't want to say we. Yeah, but like we did. Like, because when you had a campaign, then it was like, cool, all right, I'll let you come host for a week. That was all I really did.
Yeah.
But that was such a huge platform when you were trying to raise money for a health thing or an education thing or whatever it was.
Very engaged followers. Like it was a ready built platform that you shared. I think we talk about how when an elder passes away, it's like losing a library. And I think a lot about, and what are the books in that library? Like what are the stories that we tell ourselves, that we tell each other, and also that transcend generations. And our children are entering the world very differently to how we did. The internet is changed because of IndigenousX. You know, the way mob recognize, you know, the places where we can share our words and our work, the ability to take things that are created with the academy in mind by some and our community in mind by others, and say, well, hang on, if we share it on a platform like IndigenousX, maybe we can be helping both. Like maybe we can actually be hitting the goals for both spaces. They don't have to be either or. And in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, these things have been normalized. They're becoming normalized, which is a great thing. But where is it recorded that this is why? Like there are some articles on IndigenousX here and there, but the way I feel about your PhD and your work is it's bringing together stuff that's existed on the internet and in a lot of people's personal experience and making a little home for it, you know, and then when you get to the end of it, I'm going to start pushing you to turn it into a book because it needs to be a book as well, but because we need to be able to point to the activism, the campaigning, like you say it so casually, but for years you were just giving your time to creating and holding that space for IndigenousX. You weren't making money from it. You weren't even trying to. It ended up becoming a business. It was something you were able to build and pour even more time into. But you were doing that on top of, you know, raising a family and working and all of that. And we have so many fantastic examples of this. And so I'm very proud of you for finally doing the PhD because you've been more than capable forever. But also with this episode, I hope that if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I'm too old for any of that, that you know that you're not and that you recognize it as an opportunity to bring together some of your life's work and create something that can live beyond you and can be a record for the next generation or other generations, not even after you, maybe alongside you, maybe older than you, who have been thinking about things they want to do, and this is the inspiration to, I could do something like that. Actually, that might be the tool or the resource. And I think
for a lot of mums, it is that like telling the stories that need to be told and just making oral history part of that written history or academic history or accessible in different ways for different people. But like I said, I was saying earlier, like so much of academia is finding a cleverer way to say the same thing. But there are so many other ideas. And when you've actually got a new idea, you don't have to say it that cleverly. You can just say it as it is. And that was one of the things I think I had that imposter syndrome in the early days where the researchers doing this. And I remember I can't remember who, but someone sort of said to me, it's like, no, you say the things that then the academics write papers on. Like I don't need to write the papers. Like we could just say the thing and just offering that truth, that perspective that isn't there adds such a value. And I'm very happy for me to write something that in terms of the game of being clever, other people can take anything that I say that isn't there and make it more clever or say it's crap, like whatever. Because I think, but that's a valuable contribution too. Like in the world, it is like an idea that's like, oh, that sounds interesting. But when we really deep dive into it, here's why it doesn't work. I'm totally okay for my ideas to get found to be that. Because it is, but it's just adding a part of myself and that worldview into the space. One, like I said, to prove to myself that I can, that it has merit, that it has value, but that, what we've done matters. And I think it's something, I know we talk a lot about in terms of trauma and other things, but it's that if someone can learn from my mistakes and successes, then it adds an extra layer of depth and meaning. And I think that's that, talking about like being a good ancestor one day, like the idea that someone who wants to try something, because there's, like I said, there's so many weird things that we do. I don't know what it is that you might be trying to do in 50 years' time. But you read this story and go, oh, that helps me do this. I don't have to work that out from scratch. Or I can avoid that entirely because I see why that doesn't work. That to me is a really powerful legacy to leave, more than, like IndigenousX as a platform or whatever. Like it's a thing, but it's that, if I can add value to someone else's journey, that's how we make meaning of our own.
I love it. Well, on that note, thank you for joining me, future Dr. Luke Pearson, owner, founder, CEO of IndigenousX. And yeah, Yalu.